The Secrets of Network Television. This is part 2 of my interview with Dean Batali on writing and directing network dramatic television programs. Stay tuned because it's going to give you some insight into what happens behind the writer's room door. I'm Phil Cook, and welcome back with Dean Batali, talking about writing and directing for network television. Dean wrote the book Watching TV Religiously, and it's got a chapter in there that actually explains what showrunners do, what writers do, how the writer's room works. In fact, that's what I want to get in today, really the aspects of how network television works, because there's a lot of people that have contacted me that want to be a writer, want to be a producer, or, you know, when I started out, the term showrunner didn't exist.
Yeah,
I don't know where it came from. How did it happen?
I don't know. It was always just executive producer or head writer.
Yeah.
It kind of goes back to the Dick Van Dyke show. Dick Van Dyke was essentially the showrunner of that show. There was another executive producer over him. But, 30 Rock, Tina Fey on that show was the showrunner. I don't know. It seems like in the last 10 or 15 years, everybody's became known. There's a book out there called The Showrunners. There was a documentary on iTunes. It's actually pretty good, called Showrunners, I think. Interviews with a bunch of different showrunners. It's really worth watching.
So in contrast to movies where on the set the director is pretty much the main guy, in a television series it's the writer, producer type person who's the showrunner.
They say television's really more the writer's medium. Everybody on set, so I was executive producer on Good Witch, the showrunner on Good Witch recently. I'd also been one of 3 showrunners on 70 Show, the final season. But on that set, the director, before he or she could move on, would have to turn to me and say, is that good? Do you need anything else? And then I had final cut in post-production and say over all the stories. Now, of course, the network is saying which stories I can do or not, but I'm the one in charge of the writer's room, which we'll talk a little more about, deciding this is how we're going to do the stories, and then the one who rewrites all the scripts. And then as much as I could be on set, I'm the one in charge there as well.
And also, you're also revolving through different directors. So you're the only one that really has the overarching picture of where the show's going, where it's been. So that's why they reflect.
Yeah, on Good Witch, we shot 2 episodes at a time. We block shot over 14 days, 2 different episodes. But I'd always have a tone meeting with them early on, and then pre-production meetings, concept meetings, and then we'd sit down and before they started shooting, they'd talk about how they were going to do things. And I would generally let them decide what angles and shots they're going to do and get the energy of the show. But I'd be fine-tuning the performances, and I'm the one who knows, okay, this is what we're planting for the future, and keeping the, because we're telling a 12-hour story on something like Good Witch, even though it's individual episodes.
So when it comes to writing, of course, I spend most of my time writing books, writing documentaries, advertising, commercials and things. So I write alone for the most part. How does a writer's room actually work?
So, anybody who wants to be a television writer, at the top of the resume it should say plays well with others, because that is the key to being a successful television writer. Yes, you have to be able to write alone, but most of our time is spent, anywhere from 6 to 12 hours a day in the room with other people, breaking stories, coming up with ideas. Somebody will come in and say, Evan, let's do an episode about, we did an episode on Good Witch about they find a dollhouse in the attic and they pull it out of the attic, and the stuff that happens in the dollhouse is starting to happen in real life. That was the original pitch. So then we spend about 2 days, and there were about 5 or 6 of us in that writer's room. It was actually kind of a small staff. A lot of staffs have 10 or 13 writers or so. Roseanne in its early days had like 22 writers.
That'd be chaos, it seems like.
It can be chaos, but it's sort of like an orchestra. So you have to have a good conductor there. You generally have 3 or 4 people who are doing about 50% of the writing, about 50% of the talking, and then the rest of the staff is kind of contributing jokes or contributing ideas. Sometimes you'd break up the room. Maybe one room would work on jokes, one room would work on stories. But you got to be able to really communicate well, not interrupt people, be able to really focus, follow the line. So when I'm running the show, I'll say, somebody will pitch an idea, and I'll say, I really like that idea. Let's follow down that road. The show House actually is the best show that represents what a TV writer's room is like, because you have one person up front, usually at a whiteboard, and everybody's pitching ideas, and then that house who was running the show would say, okay, well, you guys go check out this, and you guys check out this, and then we'll come back here. And then you see how the ball was kind of advanced. So we would spend 2 or 3 days breaking that story. Somebody would go write a beat sheet, they'd bring it back, then we talk about
explain
that.
a beat sheet.
Beat sheet is all just the kind of one line for each scene, the main thing that's happening in the scene. The story based down to on 1 or 2 pages at the most. All the act breaks are really clear. When we would break the story, we'd break it on a big whiteboard, and Good Witch had a teaser and then 5 acts. So we break it in the acts kind of from the inside out. We know what are the big act breaks we want to get to, then we kind of fill in the blanks. The same way with Buffy. which in the commercial age of TV was a teaser and 4 acts. You know, what are the big things that are going to happen? What are the big chases? What are the big exciting things? Then we kind of film it like, so then we would try to get that down to 1 or 2 pages on a beat sheet. We'd talk about that. And then the writer would go off and expand that into an outline that would be anywhere from 7 to 15 pages. So that's when you are writing alone.
Okay.
But even then, that would come back, and then we'd write the script, and then I'd give the notes, and then they'd write the script off of that. So from the time somebody gives the concept of the show till the time it's actually written as a script, we've been in the room for about 35 or 40 hours together.
Wow.
And then on 70's show, or another show like that, where you're getting a lot of notes from the network, we would do rewriting together too. So we would have a run-through on Tuesday, and we'd have a network run-through on Wednesday, and they'd give us notes, and we'd have to change. Sometimes you'd have to throw out an entire story, or you'd say, these jokes aren't working, we need a new act break, we need a new teaser. So it's everybody contributing to the one thing, which is why playing well is key.
So you have 7 or 8 people in the writer's room, and you're kicking around ideas and trying to figure out the structure, but who actually writes the script at the end of all that?
Well, each episode would be assigned to a writer.
Okay.
So like that Dollhouse episode, there was a woman who came in and pitched that. She was writing that episode. So after I gave notes on the outline, she'd go away for 2 weeks and write the script.
Okay.
Actually, it was about 7 days because we were always behind schedule. And then we'd get notes from the network, and then I would do the final rewrite.
Okay.
So what happens is, and this is what's frustrating to be a writer on television, because I've been on the other side of this, by the time the script hits the screen, I've ended up rewriting it almost completely. The structure is the same mostly, or maybe the network pulled out a story and we have to film it on Tuesday and it's Saturday night, and so I just have to rewrite it myself.
Okay.
So her DNA is still in the script, but not a lot of her words. On Buffy the Vampire Slayer, there's a lot of scripts that my partner and I wrote that we only have like 10% of our dialogue there. There's other scripts where we have like 90% of it. So it all kind of depends on how it gets. So yeah, so that's why a big staff is nice, because you can send off a writer or two and keep breaking other stories.
Okay. So are there people in the writer's room that never write scripts, but they're brilliant with jokes or brilliant with structure or brilliant with something else?
Yes, generally everybody will get at least a script a year, but especially in a sitcom room, a lot of times you're bringing, like, you want a couple of good joke writers, a couple of good story people. I always want story more so.
Yeah.
The joke will come eventually, even if it takes all day, but it's people who can figure out the story and make the scene funny in a broader sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of people, when we'd split the room, often we'd take the story people, put them in one room, the better joke people. You know, there's a lot of, I know some people now in Hollywood are getting hired like off of Twitter accounts.
Really?
Like on comedies. They've never written a script before, and playwrights have never done
But they're funny.
But or stand-ups, a lot of stand-ups in sitcoms.
So you mentioned a minute ago, you know, the age of commercial television.
Yeah.
The act structure was kind of broken up because of commercial placement back then, right?
Yeah, you know, it's weird. I have about 10 writing samples. Some of them have no act breaks in it because they're written for streaming.
Right.
And some of them I've updated because I wrote them in the age of commercials.
Yes.
Now, Good Witch was broadcast cable, so that was a teaser in 5 acts, and that affects how you break a story.
Yeah.
But other shows streaming for Netflix or HBO cable, non-commercial cable, there's no act breaks. Same length.
I wondered if do you stick with the same kind of structure even though there's no commercials now?
I argue that even if there's no commercials, you're still breaking a story that's probably 5 acts or a teaser in 5 acts. That something big is happening every 10 pages or so, and most hour-long scripts are in the 55 to 65 page range. But you don't have to be so structured as we did on Buffy and Good Witch and 70's Show, which had a teaser and 2 acts and a tag, whereas like you come up with these big changes that happen, these big kind of don't leave the room moments. And Joss Whedon on Buffy was great about coming up with these act breaks that are going to keep people watching over the commercial.
One of the things that I was thinking about personally is being in that writer's room. You talk about playing well with others, but you also have to take criticism well.
Yeah.
And a lot of writers have really issues with criticism.
Yeah, and they don't last very long in television.
Okay.
There's kind of a rule in most writer rooms that you can pitch something twice, but after you've pitched it twice, you've made your point and you kind of have to move on. And some of that is finding a showrunner who's polite, and it takes effort for me to be polite, but I do try to validate people's ideas. I tell my writers that whatever they're pitching to me, it's going to look like I don't like what they're saying because I have a resting writer's face that just looks angry and mean, and I'm always thinking about...
That explains a lot.
Yeah. Try being my wife or children. It's a challenge. But yeah, you got to be able to just offer up things and know that if it's not used, it doesn't say you're bad, it's just that your idea doesn't work. But what I'll see is writers start to mope and then not contribute for the next 45 minutes. And I just kind of continue to, especially with smaller staffs, continue to draw people out. And by the way, you can make your own writer's room as groups. And whether it's film or TV, I encourage screenwriters to do the same thing. Get together in a room, put a whiteboard up there and talk about the story all day and take your beat sheet or outline and say, is this working? What if we move this scene here? And kind of decide, you're the showrunner for your script. And say, look, I like that idea, but I want to go down this direction.
Ed Catmull, when he wrote his book, Creativity Inc., about Pixar, talked about their brain trust, which essentially was a group of real leaders that had been there from the beginning that would look at every film, but they got along with each other. They knew how to be encouraging. They were never overly critical. And he said it's the heart of what makes Pixar work.
It really is it really is the best of everybody. If you can get if you can get that orchestra playing together with a good conductor, you can really get the best sound possible.
So what happens when you have problems with the network? When you get to the end and you get the script done, who at the network do you deal with? I mean, who is it different everywhere?
Yeah, so some networks you're generally dealing with the development, the creative executive assigned to your show.
Okay.
So on that 70s show, we generally had 2 executives who would come to our run-throughs every Wednesday. Twice a year, maybe the president of the network would come, and 3 or 4 times the head of comedy would come. But generally, these executives had the authority to give notes. Now on Hallmark, is a different.
They may have had the authority, but did they have the expertise?
Yes. And it is odd. There are some writers who really push back against network notes. And I feel, if I hire a contractor to work on my house, he or she's going to do what I ask them to do. And if they think it should be painted blue, but I want it red, they're going to paint it red, and that's what I feel. The network says, this is how we want the show. So I've worked on networks that's like, this is not how I would write the show, but that's how they want it done. Hallmark had 3 or 4 executives plus the president who wanted to be involved with they're very hands-on network. So I would have to kind of schedule it, get on the phone with 5 or 6 of them, get pages and pages of notes. It was actually kind of difficult, but they know their brand really, really well. Other networks, it depends. It's 1 or 2 people, but you're generally working with 2 people most intimately, and they're sometimes getting a directive from the president on down. A lot of times I try to figure out, if this is a note that is just something they prefer different, or if they're demanding it to be different. And that's kind of how I keep my job or not. On one show, the first season I worked on it, I did everything the network asked for, no questions asked. Second season, I still did everything, but I argued a little bit, and I would kind of fight back. I still did everything they asked for, but they didn't ask me back for a 3rd season after that.
Really?
So yeah, it's you kind of have to pick your battles.
Oh my gosh!
But again, remember, it's their money. Now a lot of networks now are advertising. Netflix, HBO, they kind of just give the show to the producer. FX, that's not. You got to make your way up in Hollywood a little to get that.
The thing I notice most about network TV writers is that they just write a lot. I mean, that's an insane schedule.
I use Goodwitch as an example because over those 18 months, did 24 episodes, which is about 18 hours of content. That's 9 movies a year and a half that I was responsible for writing, supervising, post-production, supervising the music and everything. And I'm not saying all of it's good.
Right.
I think there's 2 or 3 episodes in there that are really good of those 24. But yeah, I always feel I'm a craftsperson more than an artist as a TV writer. A lot of screenwriters, I think, consider themselves more artists, and maybe some of the better writers consider themselves artists. But I got to get the job done as good as I can. And even when people are just starting out, just get the job done as good as you can, and either make it or get it read out loud in front of other people.
That's really important. Well, tell me about that. Getting it read out. I do think, if I can't find anybody who will read it out loud, I'll just stand in my office and read the script. Because I do think hearing it, it's different.
Yeah. Well, I started in theater. We talked about it in the other one. And that was the benefit I had that I didn't realize I had when I came here, is I'd already written dialogue that had been said in front of other people. I'd written jokes that were supposed to be funny. I'd written scenes that were supposed to keep people's attention. And you just got to get a group to read it out loud. Even I was running Puppy Dog Pals for Disney Junior. We would do a reading of the script, just the writers and a couple of the artists would sit around just so we could get the feel, make sure all the dialogue comes out of people's mouths correctly, that it sounds the way it should. There's even companies you can pay now to have your scripts performed by actors and actresses.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think you need to spend that money.
Yeah.
But you got to get it read, and more so you got to get it in front of people, and whether or not that's doing a web series, but I continue to think live theater is the best way to learn how to get writing out there.
All right, let's talk about your personal writing schedule. Do you find that a routine helps you crank this stuff out? I mean, when you have that kind of pressure, is there a certain time of day when you're best?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
I find a job helps me out because that gives me the deadline. So
that does help.
When I'm on it, so when I was running Good Witch, I was working about 90 hours a week. And I was living up in Toronto after we had broken all the stories, but I'm up there doing rewrites and everything, and I would just write whenever I had a half hour or 45 minutes just to I got to get a scene out. So just kind of spit it out. I'd write pretty much all weekends. When I'm not working now, pretty much on any given week, I'll have 3 or 4 meetings that kind of break up the week because I'm out pitching ideas or anything. But I generally, I go to the gym in the morning and I'm generally home about 10 or 10:30.
Okay.
And we'll kind of take care of emails and stuff. It's hard for me to get going till the afternoon.
You're not an early morning person?
No, not a morning. Are you?
Yeah.
I wish I was. I wish I could just sit down and write. And I have one friend who works on his own projects. He sets the timer every day for 45 minutes, sits down, and writes on his own projects for 45 minutes constantly before moving to whatever the assignments are. I think that's really good advice actually, because then you're always working on something that you know. But it's hard for me to get in that groove. I can write really, really fast when I have to. But like right now, I'm working more on ideas than I am scripts. The script writing is actually the easy part for me.
Yeah.
It's the coming up with series ideas. You know, I can break, once an outline is written, I told you about those 40 hours it takes to get the outline ready to write. Once I have that outline in good shape, I can write an hour-long script in about 20 hours, over 2 days pretty much. But yeah, it's
and you're talking an hour script.
Yeah, about 60 pages, 65 pages. And again, I'm not saying it's good, I'm just saying it's done, but it could be filmed.
Well, there's something to be said for done.
Yeah. But no, I'm kind of frustrated with myself that I've never had that ability to just set the timer and do it, that when the deadlines are there, I can do it. And I'm always producing stuff. I have 4 or 5 different things I'm producing now, supposed to be or pitching now, supposed to be sending ideas over. And that's a different sort of skill. A document that presents a TV show is different than an outline or a script or something like that.
It's funny, people come to me who lead creative people, business people, advertising people, pastors, whatever, and they think writers are horrified about deadlines. But the truth is, I think creative people actually love deadlines because it's perspective. I don't even get serious about a project till I see the dedeadline in the distance.
Right. Well, and this is where I go into it. It just has to be good enough, and sometimes good enough is great. I don't agree with
I agree
with the people that say good enough. It is never good enough. Sometimes it can be good. The deadlines help a lot, and you just got to kind of get it out there.
So tell me about pitching. Are you good at pitching your projects to networks or whoever, production companies?
I've gotten better at it. Yeah, it took me a long time. I don't think it was till
really?
I think I've pitched about 20 different shows, probably to hundreds of different. I mean, when I have my file of dead show ideas, I figured out it's really that first 90 seconds. Are you grabbing them away? And sometimes my pitches are things about telling a story that doesn't have anything to do with the show, but kind of backing into talking about my dad went to prison when I was 10 years old. So I have one pitch that talks about how that affected my life, and then that moves into the pitch. I have another pitch that starts with Oprah Winfrey and David Geffen and Steve Jobs got together years ago and decided they were going to give away $100 billion between them all. And I said, I have a show that kind of represents a portion of that. It's like getting people to sort of go,
a hook.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
I've talked on other episodes about studies that have indicated when you meet someone for the first time, we live in such a distracted world. We have so many options that we've adjusted our behavior that we decide what we think of that person in the first 4 to 8 seconds. We haven't had time to talk to them really or get to know them, but we've got other things to do. So, and I think it works with pitching and other things too. If you don't capture them in the first 10 seconds or so.
I've always felt, I wish that they just had like a button where they had like a trap door that they could push, because like 40 seconds in, if you're not interested, like I've sat across from enough girls in high school who didn't want to talk to me. So it's just like, you're not interested, just press the button and I'll go away. But when I'm talking to people about pitches, it's the same with scripts. Your first page has to be good, first 3 pages, first 10 pages, really focus on that. Same with pitch. What is the first 15 seconds? What's the first minute? What's the first 3 minutes? And then what's beyond that? And when I go into pitch, I'm generally talking for about 10 or 15 minutes straight before they ask any questions.
And you don't have to bring in watercolor scenes of the show or other. You don't have to get fancy. just being good at communicating the heart of the show.
I have started to bring in Sizzle Reels. Sometimes I'll put some clips together. Sometimes I'll bring in a magazine article or something that I'll show them, or a little thing
and
I did.
A Sizzle Reel is something that you're never going to broadcast. It's just a short trailer type thing.
Yeah, just
right?
a sample of, I'm pitching a thing about a musician in the early 70s. So I have some pictures of him, a newscast about him. There was an article about him in a magazine, those kind of things. So those kind of things help. But yeah, one good thing is try to talk about your favorite show for 10 minutes to somebody who's never seen the show, and see if you could get them interested in watching the show.
That's an interesting thing. That's good.
Yeah,
interesting thing to practice.
And again, it's a completely different skill than writing. Pitching, storytelling, and that's the kind of, I've sold a couple things, but there's some people who've sold dozens of things but never actually worked on shows. There's a lot of writers who sell well. Again, it's a different sort of skill, but you do have to know it in order to kind of get in these rooms.
All right, what have we left out? Anything, if there's somebody out there who wants to be a writer, a network TV writer in Hollywood, what would you say? Anything, the last thing that we forgot about?
Yeah, you can get good wherever you are. It doesn't have to be Hollywood. I always say to people, come to Hollywood as soon as you're able, but you don't have to, make sure you have material before you get here. Some people come here at 22 with nothing written. Take the year or two, get some material, get some entry-level job skills on a set, on a production office, because if I'm going to hire you, I'm going to hire you as a PA. So your film aesthetic degree doesn't really matter to me. I need to know what kind of skills you have. And find a support group of people. From a writing perspective and from an emotional support perspective, from a spiritual perspective. Find people that surround you that will make you better as a writer. It's one of the reasons I found a partner. I thought he's really good. He makes me a better writer. Yeah. And the people that I hang out with are generally people that make me better people. So it's kind of a combination of
that community thing. I think is important because artists tend to, writers,
especially writers who tend to be kind of introverts. Yeah. I'll put writers and producers together. The producers are all talking to each other, making deals, and the writers are over here kind of huddling and drinking coffee because we tend to not be extroverts, and I can force myself to be that way. But yeah, find that group of people, and then that becomes a writer's group, or it becomes a spiritual support group, an emotional support group on that level.
Cool. You can find out about Dean at IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, or go to at Dean Batali on Twitter.
I am barely on Twitter, but if you search Dean Batali Hollywood, I've done a lot of interviews and articles and writings and that, and it'll pop up on the first page. Yeah.
Good idea. There's this thing out there called Google. It's amazing. Yes. You should try it. And don't forget, get his book, Watching TV Religiously. It's a terrific book, and it explains a lot about how writers work and how network television works, and I'd encourage you to check that out. Check us out on our blog at philcook.com, philcooke.com. And if you have any ideas, by the way, go to the blog. If you'd like us to come up with certain topics and talk about certain issues, go to the blog, let me know, and we'll cover those in future episodes. And share these episodes with friends. You have friends out there who are creative, who are writers, that are trying to figure out how to make it work. And share this episode and some of the others because I think it'll make a difference in their life. And thanks for tuning in, and we'll be coming back with more creative insight on helping you get from where you are to where you want to be.